But I'm about to show you something, and it might hurt your eyes a bit. I don't know what somebody has done. It's time for episode number 34 of Profit or Loss, the series where I buy faulty electronic items on eBay, attempt to fix them and sell them ultimately for a profit. This here is Sally's spectacular spreadsheet, and in the last episode we did of this series, we made a profit of £87.10. That, however, wasn't enough to bring our total profit into the green, so we are currently minus £72.21. Is this going to be the episode we get ourselves back into the positive? I've even straightened up the signs you can see behind me. Usually they're a little bit wonky. I've straightened them up, and I'm even going to put these old gloves in the bin, and I've got some brand new ones. Before we go ahead with looking at today's item, I don't want to touch on it too much. I just want to say I'm a little bit overwhelmed by all the positive comments from last week's video. Essentially, just a massive thank you from me to you for watching. Let's take a look. Now, I might have overpaid a little bit for today's item. It's a Nintendo Switch, and I paid a total of £85 for it. Now, normally if I was purchasing a Nintendo Switch from eBay, I'd look at maybe a maximum of £50. This, however, does come with a few extras. So let's see if it was a win or a loss. What do we have? So I've got the charger, and I've got a HDMI lead as well, which is, the chargers themselves are actually pretty pricey, the OEM ones, as well as a docking station. So I've managed to pick myself up a docking station as well. I don't know if it works or not. Again, that'll have to be tested. But these as well sell for a pretty penny. And last but not least, the actual Nintendo Switch, which does have, a couple of chew marks in it, I think. Does actually look like it's been a chew toy for a dog, but we should be able to sort that out, no problem. Does it come with a game? No, it doesn't. And we also don't have the SD card. And yeah, as you can see, condition-wise, it's not in the best of condition. We have quite a few scratches. Screws. Okay, so we're missing the two bottom screws. We're missing the screw at the top as well, which is usually located here. Yeah, we're missing that screw also. Listing states it has no power. Apparently it was purchased working, and when they got it, they charged it for 24 hours and it didn't work. And I guess instead of trying to get their money back from the seller, they just listed it on eBay as faulty. Over to our scope, and how is the actual charging port looking? I don't see any bent pins or anything like that. Some slight marks on the pins, but nothing to be concerned about. And a very common thing you usually see is the clasp at the top is a little bit loose. We do have a crack in the plastic here as well, something to bear in mind. With those observations being made, let's take our ammeter and plug it into our Nintendo Switch and see what kind of a draw we get. So it lights up, which is good, 0.07 amps, 0.09. Now hold on, because that to me indicates a pretty normal charge when the battery in the Nintendo Switch is completely flat. I'm not, however, getting anything to display on the screen. So usually right now we'd have a battery symbol up here in the top left, but we don't get that. So I'll probably just leave this in charge for about 5-10 minutes or so and see if I have a change in current by the time I get back. All right, so we're at 460 milliamps and I still have nothing on the screen. So I think the battery is charging, but nothing's happening. The Switch isn't turning on. I'm not counting my chickens yet. I think that's the saying. It sounds weird to say, but I'm not going to count them yet. I have faith that we can restore this Nintendo Switch. Let's take it apart. Well, I was going to say, I wonder if it's been open or not. I've just taken the screws out, but it doesn't have the foam pad that sits where the SD card connector is. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's definitely been open before. And first looks, what do we have? Okay. The water indicator, this sticker down here, is slightly polka dot, which does mean that it has suffered some liquid damage, pink polka dot, but I can't see any signs of corrosion on the board. And just from this angle, it doesn't look like there's been any work done to the Switch so far anyway. Whilst I'm at this level of taking the Switch apart, I do want to see if we get a backlight just down here, because then that would indicate if we have a faulty screen or not. So if I plug that in, does the backlight show anything? It's right here where my finger is, and I can't see a light, so the backlight isn't turning on. That's kind of good or bad depending on how you look at it. The good being that the screen is probably working, however the motherboard isn't. Seeing as I'm not even getting a backlight to enable, I am going to take the rest of the Switch apart, remove the motherboard from the chassis and do some further diagnostics. Now we're on over to the microscope. Quick visual inspection, M92T36 looks okay. The port itself looks fine. It's just a little thermal paste that we have in between. BQ looks fine. Because we had the water damage indicator, I am just seeing if there are any signs of corrosion or liquid damage. What about that? Is that okay? All right, that's around our max IC, so the max 77812. We have signs of corrosion here, good to know, and a little bit around this cap. Okay, good. I say good, I mean that in the sense of I can physically see where there might be an issue. That's why I say it's good. It might not be good for profit, but we'll see. Again, just a further inspection. I reckon on the other side of this board, we're going to see some absolute mayhem. Not too shabby at all. Quite a clean looking board actually. No further signs of corrosion or liquid damage. That's really, really good. Again, this is where we had the small amount of corrosion. We flip the board, it goes to here, and there isn't really too much to worry about on this side. The APU is here, that's something to worry about, but the other side of where we were just looking is right about here, and there's nothing here other than the traces. So let's get our multimeter and just measure and see if we have any shorts. My guess, I haven't measured anything or looked at anything prior. I reckon it's still very possible we might have a short here on this rail, which links to this max IC here. Maybe even this cap has gone. Let's see. Let's grab the multimeter. All right, multimeter in continuity mode, which is the mode that beeps when we have a complete circuit. So I'll measure the fuse. Yep, fuse seems to be okay. Let's measure here. Okay, so we don't have a short here. That's what I thought we might do. Let's measure the rest of BQ whilst we're here. Seems to be A-okay. I'm just going to check this cap because visually it doesn't look great, does it? What do we have? So this side of the cap is ground. I'm going to put it into diode mode. I'm going to see what reading we get. So we get 0.358 voltage drop, which to be honest with you seems fairly normal. That's 0.14, 0.35. That's ground. That's 0.055. Notoriously, I believe this is actually very low regardless. Now, I know the max IC, as well as the BQ path that I just showed you, does go up to here. So we get 358 here. That's ground. And that's 0.426. So I actually think our charging circuit is all right. Let's check around M92T36. Now, I'm going to stay in diode mode. I'm going to go straight to the CPU cap, which is here. 0.338. Okay. So our quote-unquote dreaded CPU cap is fine. Just checking everywhere else. Everywhere seems to be alright. 0.425 in diode mode. Yeah, everything seems to be A-okay. Just quickly check our backlight connector. That all seems to be reading fine as well. Just checking some random readings on other components I have around the board just so I can test on a known good working board. LCD connector pins are also okay, but like I said, we have a problem with the backlight not initializing here, so the switch isn't turning on. So I'm not really too concerned with that at the moment. I'm just checking the eMMC. I've had issues with these before. I actually had a shorted cap on here once. Just make sure we have no shorts. No, 0.4 there. 0.5 there. 0.5 there. Okay, that also seems to be okay on the face of it. Everything around the Wi-Fi IC also seems to be alright. At this point, I was just checking all over the board to see if there were any anomalies compared to other boards that I'd worked on previously. And there wasn't. Just having a little look underneath the Max IC, because that's where we had the corrosion. I'm just seeing if I can see anything underneath the chip. Because immediately my kind of first thought is, should we just swap that out just to make sure? Doesn't look like there's any corrosion underneath the IC itself. But you never know. This path here actually measures 19 ohms. It's meant to, so I'm not concerned about it. Before I get ahead of myself and start changing chips out and stuff, I am just going to try a different battery. So we go plug it in. So we get 350 milliamp draw, 470. Does it restart? Because if this switch restarts, then it would actually prove as good. But it's not doing that, as you can see, 460 milliamp hours. It's just sat on 460. So the next step that I'm going to try is a nice simple reflow and clean, because if there is corrosion under the chip, we could have some bad solder joints. So I'm just going to reflow this with some flux and see if that works. We're using a modest 440 degrees Celsius here with an airflow speed of 50% on the Atten. That's quite a lot, to be honest. The Atten pumps out air like you wouldn't believe. Just getting the area hot first, and now I'm going to come in with some flux and see if I can just get a little push on the IC. Just a little one. Nothing too severe. That popped back into place nicely. Probably now is a good time to clean my brush. As you can see, it's left quite a bit of flux residue on the board. And you can clean the brushes by simply leaving them in an ultrasonic cleaner, but I currently don't have one, so I'm just going to have to replace it. I just tend to use my old toothbrushes after I've cleaned them, obviously. Let's see if that's made any difference whatsoever. Doubtful, but it is what it is. We have to try these things. Right, let's have a quick bish bash bosh then. What do we think? Is it going to restart? That's what we're looking for here. Here we go. Plugged it in. 350, 470. Does it turn off and turn back on? That's what we're looking for. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so still nothing. Remember, this is also me just guessing that it's going to be the max IC because I can't find any shorts on the board. I think then in that case, it's time to replace it. Just as I've literally put the chip on, I realized I wasn't recording, but I've swapped it over. We've put a new chip on. This is the old IC that I've just taken off. Zoom us in a little bit. Does the switch, restart. Plug it in. Still get a light. That's good. We still get a current draw. 460. Does it do anything? Does it turn off and then back on? Doesn't look like it, hey? Just going to sit there. We don't seem to have a short on the board from what I can see anywhere, not around BQ, M92T36. We've successfully swapped out the max IC as well. We've got a little resistor here. I'm just checking to make sure we have a good reading on it. Yeah, we have 10k ohms on that resistor. So I'm a little bit bamboozled, to be honest with you, because usually we have a short on this line here where the BQ IC is that will then be causing our issue. But we know that the board has suffered corrosion/water damage because the indicator showed signs of that, as well as the fact we had signs of it around the max IC here. I honestly believe removing the port isn't going to do anything. I'm just a bit bamboozled as to why we can't find a short anywhere on the board at all. I think this will make a prime candidate for a stream. If you're watching this back and the stream has already occurred, I'll pin it in the top comment of this video. I'm not going to write off the whole amount as a loss because we have the docking station and a charger. Those things will amount to something, so I'll subtract them from the £85 that we spent. We'll sort all the pricing out for that at the end though. But let's move on to item number 2. Item number 2 is a OLED Nintendo Switch. Now this one, again, I've probably paid a pretty penny for. I've not attempted to repair any OLEDs on the channel yet. I have worked with them at work, but that's why I paid a little bit extra for it, because I thought it would be nice to have it on the channel. Quick pause on this lovely still frame that I've selected here. I don't know what's happened to the audio whilst I'm recording this Switch OLED, so I do apologize. I've not changed anything in my recording settings. It just appears I have lost a lot of bass, but don't worry, it's not your audio, it's my microphone for some reason. And the screen is in really good condition as well. I paid a grand total of £100 for this faulty OLED, and I can already tell what's wrong with it. Why is that charging port sticking out like it is? You see that? That's not right. This charging port has had lip filler. Luckily, we still have our 2 bottom screws. We have the screws at the sides as well, and we also have the one at the top. Surprisingly, it has no power, and I'm going to go over to the scope to inspect this charging port. I'm not going to put the ammeter in or any charging cable or anything like that because we can quite clearly see what the issue is. What in the name of life has happened here? Is the port itself okay on the inside? It is, but I don't know what's happened. I would go ahead and assume that somebody has replaced this port, and I'm hoping that this isn't factory, because if that is a factory port, it means that what's happened is somebody has pulled it and it's potentially ripped traces on the main motherboard. I hope that isn't the case. Let's go ahead and take it apart. It looks like it's been taken apart before because we're missing the sticker that covers over this antenna here, and these stickers are a little bit broken. Now these should all be the same size, which is rather long. You see that long screw down here, but somebody's put a short screw in for some reason. And we have another short screw as well. Now, to be clear, I have successfully repaired, I would say somewhere in the region of 10 or so of these Nintendo Switch OLEDs from charging ports as well as M92T36 issues. I've never had one with a P13 issue yet, but I'm about to show you something and it might hurt your eyes a bit. I don't know what somebody has done to this charging port, but we might have a slight issue. That is just, I mean, it's art in its own form. The speaker connector, I think, is okay. It looks a little bit pushed back, but I think that looks like it survived. There's no screws in the port, which go here and here, because, I mean, it's quite obvious to see why that is. We're actually missing a shield cover that goes over the port and clips in here. And I'm just checking the rest of it and seeing how far over they've actually gone. They've managed to put this cable back correctly, which is good because that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. They've put the Joy-Con rail back fine. This is definitely going to be interesting. So let's just disconnect that battery, shall we? I'm struggling to get the screw out for this, and it's pretty understandable why. Look at it. Bored out of the chassis. How bad does this look? Pretty bad. I highly doubt that any of these pins are actually making a contact. I'm not going to move them just in case they do end up ripping any traces. The port isn't sat flush to the board. As you can probably see, there's quite a big gap there from the actual board itself to the port. The back of the port, again, not in great condition, just a bunch of solder in the through holes. So the screws are meant to go in here. So we need to get rid of all of that solder as well. The good news, I guess, and the positive that I should take from this is it doesn't look like M92T36 has been changed, and it doesn't look like they've actually caused any damage to other components nearby. From what I can see anyway. Is that the same for this side? Other than the fact that we have a little bit of a melted connector here, but even the BQIC, even though it might have taken a little bit of heat, actually looks okay. This is the LCD ribbon FPC connector, and I'm just making sure that they haven't inserted that incorrectly or bent any of the pins. So if I do manage to get this working, I then don't have a blank screen. That looks fine. Let's get this port off first of all and see what damage there is. So we're just going to rip this off the board quick, not, literally rip it off the board. But I've got temperature set at 450 degrees Celsius, airflow at 50% on the Atten. And I'm just going to see what we're greeted with. It should come off fairly easily depending on what they've actually used. That is bubbling. That is really chemically. Wow, wait there. I have to put my fume extractor on. That's disgusting. Okay, let's go again. That is not good. Because they've got so much solder on the port itself needs to get hot. So it's taken a while to warm up. There we go. I'm not forcing this up by any means at all. I'm letting the heat do the work. There we go. Oh my god. Okay. Wow. We definitely have some ripped traces as well. That's a real big shame. Kind of expected though. I'm just going to clear up with some isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab and see, just so I can see exactly what's going on. If I rip traces here, then they weren't fit for purpose. I'd rather not have any loose ones sat on the board. It looks a lot better, a lot cleaner already, but you can really see where the damage is here. Pretty much everywhere. So we've got this trace here, which I think this takes a pure 15 volts and then goes through the fuse to other sections of the board, so that's going to need to be restored. We have it here, but I do want it here as well, just in case. And then we've got tiny bits of wires here, which we're going to be able to put wires from, but it's going to be a tough old job. I just need to get these holes clear. It looks like they've actually taken out part of the board. I don't know what solder they've used or what flux they've used, but it is definitely not SMD friendly, I would say. I mean, look, worst case scenario, we can get this top row of pins working, and usually we can get a dock signal out of that as well, and then it will only charge one way. I'm pretty sure that's going to be worst case here because all of these look fairly strong. But in a way, I'm kind of happy because it could have been a lot worse, if we're honest. Every single trace under there could have been ripped. Just knock that off a little bit, but that's fine. We'll put it back. Okay, now we can give this a bit more of a clean and see where we're at. An issue with this is definitely going to be port stability. We have the two holes here, so I guess it won't be too bad, but these ones at the front, I mean, whoever's worked on it has completely gone through them. They've ripped through the board on both sides. We can only work with what we got, and that looks better on the back side of things. Is this just another type of flux that was used, but it's just a weird color? Now, I'm going to say I doubt it, but I don't even know if, because this area of the board is cut here, I don't think there's anything that runs through it. I'm going to assume not and assume it's just ground. There's one thing I need to do before installing the new port, and that is checking to see if we have any shorts on M92T36 or the BQIC. So let's do that quickly. Meter in continuity mode, do we have any shorts? I'm actually very surprised that we don't have any shorts because the way that port was. But I guess if nothing was connected, then it wouldn't have done anything. Just checking around BQ, checking the coil was fine. Let me check the fuse actually as well. That's okay. Caps around BQ. All right, everything seems to check out. So as long as, we install this port correctly, we shouldn't actually have any issues. My only concern, again, if I don't restore these traces, then I'm not too sure we're going to have a display on a docking station, which for some people, especially people buying on eBay, is a huge part of the reason why you get a Nintendo Switch and not a Nintendo Switch Lite. This wire here is actually way too thin. That's 0.01 mil. I think this is probably going to be the good stuff, or is that still a bit too thin? No, I think this is the good stuff. Let's use our grinding pen. Do you know what? It might even be a bit too big, this grinding pen. No, there we go, that's fine. Just to grind away at these wires. See how that is? Nice. Should do us okay. Gonna place a tiny amount of flux over here and just get rid of the solder that we currently have on those pads because I do not know what the previous technician has used. Nice and clean. And now we put more flux and we put our solder on. Just to tin everything. Some of these, I mean, that one's non-existent. Look at this. This one down here is literally, you know, hanging on by a thread. Right, let's just crack on with it, shall we? As always with trace repair, starting off, you'd feel a little bit slow and sluggish, but you do quickly pick up the pace. This wasn't too horrendous, and I managed to get it sorted in the end. All right, so this is how we're currently looking. It's not obviously finished product yet, but I'm just checking to make sure we're all good. We look okay, to be honest. But I'm going to go 200 degrees Celsius on my hot air gun and just clear up all of this now. And again, rule of thumb here, if the traces don't survive the clean, they weren't fit for purpose. So I'm just going to stroke downwards. How are we looking? Yeah, all right. We'll take it. Now I'm going to use some solder mask and just secure those traces in place. This is another very patient process where you can't apply way too much of the stuff. Might have a little bit too much there, so I'm going to just come in with cotton swab. What we need to make sure is that this is flat when we go to cure it. Using 2 pairs of tweezers here to make sure the lines go where they need to. Here we go. Okay, that's now what we're looking like. I think we're going to be good to go. All of them are tinned except for I've got a little bit of a worry with this trace, so I'm just going to tin it quickly. I've scraped some of the solder mask back, but I'm just going to tin it. There we go. Nice. Okay, here is the port. So what I'm going to do is tin the port nicely to ensure that we have plenty of solder on those pins. So hopefully when we do the reflow, it just sits nicely in place. Last but not least, a little bit of flux on the ground holes, what's left of them anyway, and fill them up with some solder. There we go, ready to go. One last clean and straighten. Just reapply a little bit of flux where we need it. Okay, it's ready to go. The most nerve-wracking part, because you only kind of get one shot here. Because if I mess those wires up, it's game over. 20% airflow, 460 degrees Celsius. Wait for that solder to wet. Here we go. That port hasn't sat properly, and I can tell because this solder hasn't bonded. So I need to go again, shimmy it about a little bit. There's a reason why it's not sitting properly, but I don't know. It looks flat to the board. Just giving it a bit of a reflow. That should be it, but I don't know what damage that's caused underneath because I've attempted the reflow. It could have crossed wires, it could have done pretty much anything. But what I know for a fact is that the port definitely wasn't sat properly to begin with. Now it's a little bit skew whiff, but we might be okay. There's a lot of gap there. I feel like it needs to come back more. And they're not connected, look. The port isn't sitting properly. These ones are now fine, but these ones over here aren't. I feel like it's lopsided. Yeah, it's just hanging off. Can you see it's just hanging off there? You can see just here and over this side as well. So it's evenly hanging off. Is there anything that's preventing it from coming through on the back? I don't think so. The only thing that I'm potentially thinking is maybe solder mask underneath was a bit too thick, which is causing the port to sit up, but I don't think it will cause it to sit up that much. So I'm going to try again. As bad as this is, I've attempted another reflow and I know that those pins aren't connected. I am just going to go over them. I'm going to solder this first front row here and we're just going to see what happens. See if we maybe even just get something one way instead of the two and go from there. So let's try that. Here we go. Careful because of the wire, but a gentle clean. So we know for a fact that those pins at the front are soldered, but we just don't know what the status is underneath. With that being said, let's see what the situation is. Now, there is a way here that by some divine miracle, the pins underneath manage to join, but I don't think that is going to be the way. So on the board, we should get anywhere between 3 to 5 milliamp hours, and then it dropped down to 0. So what do we get? We get something, okay, 15 volts, 0.05, and it drops down. I needed to see that. That's instilled a bit of hope in me. What about the other side? Do we get anything? We get something, 0.01, then drops down to 0. I'm very shocked that I get somewhat of a normal reading. I mean, look, even if it does work by some miracle, it might not work on a docking station still. You know, there's a lot of data lines underneath that USB-C port, which, because I had to reflow a bunch of times, it could be game over for a docking station. But we'll double check. I'm going to put it back together enough to test. All right, I've put it together enough to see what happens. We're looking for a battery symbol up here. If we get it, it's going to be a miracle. Let's have a look. 3, 2, 1. Okay. 0.08, dead battery. Yep, 0.010. Let's go. Okay, so we get the charging symbol. That means there's, so far, nothing else wrong with the switch. I'll leave it in charge for a little bit, and I'll come back to you in a second. We're at 730 milliamps. Apparently, it's just bumped up. So what I'm going to do is, because I don't have the chassis and stuff reassembled, I'm just going to pull this out, and hopefully, I mean, that tells me it's on. Is it on? It is indeed 25% touchscreen. There we go. Okay, sweet. I guess the biggest thing is, you know, does it actually dock? Does it work with a docking station? Does it display on a TV? Let's find out. Okay, so the Nintendo Switch has been put back together, and it is, like I said, in great condition. If I lock it, you can see, look at the screen. Smudge mark there from where I've literally just touched it, but the camera's even struggling to focus because of the glossiness of the screen. And even the back is really nice. Everything works. This is the SD card, so that works. You can see that I've got a game inserted, Immortals Phoenix Rising, so that's fine. The Wi-Fi works. Regardless if it doesn't work on a docking station, I still think we make a nice profit. Not as nice as it could have been, obviously, but still an okay one. I have it inserted into the dock. If I push the power button, it turns off, and turn it on, the light comes on. So that is good news. It's recognized by the dock. The next scene that I go over to in OBS is going to tell me if this works or not. So here we go. If we see a picture on the screen, it works. If not, then it's GG. In 3, 2, 1. No signal. Okay, that's a GG. That's bad. That's not good. What I thought I'd mention as well is this is the previous port. So this is the one that I took off that was in, obviously, a horrendous state. If you look at the bottom row, look, there's no pads on here at all, and there's no solder on those pins. So I think what's happened is they've taken the original port off, pulled the traces, just gone to stick this one on, like glue it on like this, and obviously because the traces have been ripped, it wasn't going to work. Could I potentially put more time into it and put a new port on and do the traces? Yeah, of course I could, but time is also money, and that's pretty much the same story with the first Nintendo Switch as well. Now the question is, I'm going to have a look and see how much I'm going to be able to sell this for as faulty because it doesn't display on a TV, and work out if we've made a profit or not. Let's head on over to Sally's spectacular spreadsheet and find out. Now you're going to have to stay with me here for a little bit. So for the first item that came with the docking station, the charger and the HDMI port, I think I'm going to be able to get £50 for all three of those items as a bundle if I sell it on eBay. I paid 85 minus the 50 gives us £35. So if I put £35 in the cost for the time being for the first listing, the second listing obviously £100, so we're going to go 135. In total, that was for both of them. Now with the OLED Switch, I have a slight issue. I can't find any exact replicas of ones that have been sold on eBay that don't work on a docking station. However, I have found that Switch OLEDs in cosmetically good condition seem to go for around about between £175 to £200 just for the actual tablet only. I should be able to get £140 for the console. Parts, I obviously spent on a port, so that's going to be £1 as well. And if I put my sell price of £140, that leaves us with a negative profit of -£5 and 66 pence. Updating here as well, -£5.66 brings our total profit in the series to -£77 and 87 pence. That's obviously on the basis that I can actually get £140 for the OLED and £50 as a set for the docking station, etc, etc. As I said earlier, I kind of overspent on the OLED being faulty purely because I've not actually fixed one on the channel, and technically today I haven't fixed it either, but it's in better condition than it was and somebody can now use it. If you enjoyed this week's episode of Profit or Loss, I'll leave last week's episode up here. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.